When you look at the engrossed copy of the Declaration of Independence and you see where all 56 signers put their name to the document, you will notice spaces in between the names. Most of the spaces make sense, such as the space between the signers from New York and the signers from New Jersey, or the space between the signers from Maryland and the signers from Virginia. Of course, there's also a huge space between President of Congress John Hancock's signature and the rest of the signatures. That makes sense too. But then you will notice a space right in the middle of the signers from North Carolina. At first glance, this doesn't make too much sense. Why is it there? The answer is a bit more complex than you might think. To answer this question, we must first start with this man. His name was Thomas Lynch. He was born sometime in 1727 in St. James Parish, South Carolina, to Thomas and Sabrina. Young Thomas lived on a farm in South Carolina and helped his father cultivate rice. On September 5, 1745, at the age of 25, Thomas married Elizabeth Alston. The couple had 4 children: Sabina, Esther, Elizabeth, and Thomas Jr. When Thomas's father passed away, Thomas inherited his father's house and farm on the Santee River. It was on this farm where Thomas would raise his family and be successful with rice and indigo. Sadly, Thomas's wife Elizabeth passed away sometime between 1752 and 1755. Thomas was quick to remarry, this time to Hannah Mott. Thomas entered politics at an early age. In 1752, he was elected to the Common House of Assembly as a representative from Prince Frederick Parish. In 1765, when the Stamp Act Congress formed, Thomas Lynch was a representative from South Carolina and likely traveled to New York City for the meetings. The meetings were held to formally protest the taxes being levied on the colonists by the British Parliament. From that point forward, Thomas Lynch Sr. was a committed patriot and fully in support of the American cause. When Thomas met with Josiah Quincy from Massachusetts, Quincy described Lynch as a patriot and a man of sense. When tensions mounted with the British government, Thomas was elected to join the First Continental Congress in 1774 and the Second Continental Congress in 1775. Thomas left his home in South Carolina and took up residence in Philadelphia. Thomas Lynch Sr. signed the Continental Association in October 1774, which sought to issue a formal grievance against the intolerable acts. As part of the Second Continental Congress, Thomas Lynch Sr. was selected to be part of the committee that went to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to consult with George Washington on better ways Congress could fully support the newly created Continental Army. While on this committee, Lynch, along with Benjamin Franklin and others, voted for the creation of the United States Navy. The stress of serving on the Second Continental Congress began to affect Thomas Lynch Sr., and tragically, in early February 1776, he suffered a massive stroke while in Philadelphia. The stroke apparently left Thomas bedridden and paralyzed. As a result of the stroke, Thomas was unable to serve in the Second Continental Congress. Thomas's son, Thomas Lynch Jr., was selected to take his place. Thomas Lynch Jr. had made a name for himself in his own right, helping to draft the state constitution of South Carolina and serving as a captain in the 1st South Carolina Continental Regiment. Thomas Lynch Jr. was given leave from the Army and arrived in Philadelphia just as the Lee Resolution to formally break with Great Britain was being discussed. When Thomas Lynch Jr. arrived in Philadelphia, he was suffering from malaria that he had contracted when he was serving in the 1st South Carolina Regiment. Between his illness, taking care of his sick father, and serving on the Second Continental Congress, he must have been under a significant amount of stress. But Thomas Lynch Jr. persisted, and on August 2, 1776, he became the second youngest person to sign the Declaration of Independence. The space left on the document in the middle of the South Carolina signers was for Thomas Lynch Sr. to sign. It is unclear if the delegates thought he'd ever be well enough to sign the document, or if the space was simply left in honor of him. But given that Thomas Lynch Sr. was reportedly paralyzed, it is more likely that they left the space in honor of him, proof that Thomas Lynch Sr. had rendered tremendous service to the American cause. Thomas Lynch Sr. and Jr., both very sick, were soon forced to leave Philadelphia and head back to their home in South Carolina. Sadly, Thomas Lynch Sr. would never make it home. While in Annapolis, Maryland, in December of 1776, he suffered another stroke and died. His body was never brought back to South Carolina, and he was buried in St. Anne's Burial Ground in Annapolis. The Lynches have been the only father and son to ever serve in the Continental Congress. Thomas Lynch Jr.'s illness continued to plague him. Soon after his return to South Carolina, he retired from public life. In December 1779, he boarded a ship with his wife Elizabeth bound for the Caribbean. Thomas hoped that he could find relief from his illness. The ship left South Carolina and was never seen again. It is assumed that the Lynch's ship sank and the couple drowned. Thomas Lynch Jr. was the youngest signer to die. He was only 30 years old. There isn't much left today to remind us of the Lynch family and their dedication and sacrifice to the American cause. Even Thomas Lynch Jr.'s signature on the Declaration of Independence has completely vanished. But we cannot forget this father and son duo, who both sacrificed their lives for our country. Even though there's not much left from the Lynch family today, I was lucky enough to acquire this remarkable receipt from 1763 that is actually signed by Thomas Lynch Sr. It's a receipt for 200 pounds of indigo, and it's from Lynch's father-in-law, Jacob Mott.